The landing ramp of the Star Runner hissed open, and Captain Miller stepped onto the rocky surface of Draken 7. His 4 insect-like legs clicked against the volcanic stone as he surveyed the landscape. Behind him, the rest of the survey team emerged, all aliens, all experienced explorers who had seen dozens of worlds. Well, all except one. Tommy Blake hopped down the ramp with his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. At 12 years old, he was the youngest member of any galactic survey mission in history. His mom had pulled some serious strings to get him this spot, and the alien crew members still weren't sure how to feel about having a human kid tagging along. The planet was beautiful in a dangerous sort of way. Twin suns hung in a purple sky, casting long shadows across jagged mountains. Rivers of lava glowed in the distance, and the air shimmered with heat even through their environmental suits. Steam vents hissed and bubbled across the dark stone plains. "Stick close to the group, Tommy," Captain Miller said, his translator device making his chittering voice sound stern but concerned. "This planet registers as highly dangerous on our scans." "Got it, Captain." Tommy gave him a thumbs up, already pulling out his specimen collection kit. He'd been studying xenobiology for 2 years now, ever since Earth joined the Galactic Coalition. While other kids his age were playing video games, Tommy was reading about alien ecosystems and dreaming of days exactly like this one. The team spread out in a standard survey pattern. Dr. Kelvin Ross, the only other human on the mission, kept checking his scanner and muttering about mineral compositions. The Keylite scientists floated above the ground, their semi-transparent bodies shimmering as they collected air samples. The massive Gordon security officer, who Tommy had nicknamed Big Blue because his name was unpronounceable, stomped around the perimeter with his plasma rifle ready. Everything was going perfectly. Tommy found some interesting crystal formations. Captain Miller catalogued 3 new types of heat-resistant moss. The Quillites were excited about the atmospheric readings. It was a textbook first-day survey. Then the ground started shaking. At first, Tommy thought it was just a tremor. Volcanic planets had those all the time. But the shaking got stronger. Rocks bounced and skittered across the ground. One of the Quillites made a high-pitched noise that the translator couldn't quite interpret, but definitely sounded like alarm. "Seismic activity?" Dr. Ross called out, stumbling as another tremor hit. "Negative." Captain Miller's antennae were twitching frantically. "This is something else. Everyone, back to the ship. Now." That's when Tommy saw it. A shadow fell across the landing site, way too big to be from any cloud. He looked up, shielding his eyes against the twin suns, and his jaw dropped. Wings. Massive, leathery wings that seemed to swallow the sky. They beat once, twice, and the downdraft nearly knocked Tommy off his feet. The creature was descending into the canyon just ahead of them, and even from a distance, Tommy could see it was enormous. The team scrambled to the ridge line to get a better look, and that's when they saw it fully. The creature was like something out of every fantasy story Tommy had ever read, except real and solid and absolutely terrifying. Scales that gleamed like molten copper in the sunlight. A body as long as 3 school buses. Claws that could tear through starship hull plating. A tail thick as a tree trunk, spiked and powerful. And the head, intelligent eyes that burned like miniature suns, set in a skull that could swallow a person whole. "Dragon," Tommy whispered, his voice full of awe. "Class X Predator." Captain Miller screeched. "Thermal output off the charts. Retreat. Retreat." The aliens didn't need to be told twice. Captain Miller's species had evolved as prey animals on their homeworld, and every instinct in his body was screaming at him to run. He spun and bolted, his 6 legs carrying him faster than Tommy had ever seen him move. The Quillites simply vanished, using their emergency phase shift ability to pop out of normal space. Big Blue activated his rocket boots with a roar, launching himself toward the ship in a trail of blue flame. Even Dr. Ross, normally calm and collected, was sprinting like an Olympic athlete. The dragon raised its head and looked directly at the survey team. Smoke curled from its nostrils. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing teeth like swords. It took one massive step forward, and the ground shook like thunder. Everyone ran. Everyone except Tommy. The boy stood perfectly still on the ridge, his eyes locked on the magnificent creature before him. His heart was pounding, sure, but not entirely from fear. There was something else there, curiosity, wonder, and a feeling he couldn't quite name. The dragon's movements reminded him of something. The way it held its head, the way its tail swished behind it, the way it was watching them with those intelligent eyes. It reminded him of his dog back home when strangers came to the door. Cautious. Defensive. Maybe a little scared despite being big and strong. Tommy took a step forward. "Tommy." Captain Miller's voice crackled in his earpiece from somewhere far behind him. Get to the ship. Now. But Tommy wasn't listening. He was watching the dragon's body language. Its wings were partially spread, not fully extended in an aggressive display, but not folded comfortably either. Its tail was low but twitching. Its eyes were focused but not narrowed. Tommy had spent years learning to read animals, from dogs and cats to the weird six-legged creatures in the Coalition Zoo. The signs were all there. This dragon wasn't attacking. It was nervous. Tommy slowly raised his hand, palm out, and made a soft clicking sound with his tongue. It was the same sound he used to calm his dog during thunderstorms. The dragon's head tilted slightly, like a confused puppy. Tommy took another small step forward, moving slow and steady. He kept his body relaxed, non-threatening. His hand was still raised, showing he had no weapons. Easy go, he said softly. Nobody's gonna hurt you. I just wanna say hi. The dragon lowered its massive head toward him. Tommy could feel the heat radiating from its scales even through his suit. This close, he could see every detail, the way the scales overlapped like armor, the small scars from old battles, the way its nostrils flared as it sniffed him. One breath from those nostrils could probably cook him alive, but Tommy stood his ground. The dragon's nose, easily the size of Tommy's entire torso, came within inches of his outstretched hand. There was a long moment where nothing happened. Tommy could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. In the distance, someone was screaming his name. Then the dragon gently bumped its nose against Tommy's palm. The scales were warm, rough but smooth at the same time, and vibrating slightly with some internal rumble. Tommy's face split into the biggest grin of his life. Slowly, carefully, he began to scratch along the dragon's jaw line, right where he guessed the scales might be sensitive. The dragon's eyes half closed. That internal rumble got louder, deeper. Its tail stopped twitching and started swaying gently from side to side. Yeah, Tommy said, his voice full of joy. You're just a big softy, aren't you? Who's a good girl? You are. Yes you are. 2 kilometers away, Captain Miller stood with his team at the ship's emergency airlock, watching through the telescopic cameras. His translator was making desperate beeping sounds because it couldn't find words in any language to properly express what he was feeling. The human child was petting the dragon. Actually petting it. And the dragon looked happy. What is wrong with that species? One of the Quillites whispered. Dr. Ross was recording everything, his hands shaking as he held the camera. That's just Tommy being Tommy. And that's humanity in a nutshell. 3 days had passed since the first encounter, and Captain Miller still couldn't sleep properly. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that dragon's jaws opening near Tommy's head. The nightmares were getting worse, not better, especially because the reality was somehow more terrifying than his dreams. Tommy visited the dragon twice a day now. Like clockwork. Morning and evening, the kid would grab his backpack, wave cheerfully at the horrified alien crew, and march straight into dragon territory. And every single time, Captain Miller's species prey instinct screamed at him that this was wrong, this was insane, this was going to end in tragedy. Except it never did. The team had set up their base camp on a plateau about 3 kilometers from the Dragon's Canyon. It was the minimum safe distance according to their protocols, though safe felt like a meaningless word now. They had surveillance drones hovering at maximum altitude, tracking Tommy's every move. The video feeds played constantly on the main monitor in their mobile lab. Right now, Tommy was sitting cross-legged on a flat rock while the dragon, he'd named her Ruby because of her copper-colored scales, lay stretched out beside him like an enormous cat sunbathing. The boy was reading to her from his tablet. Actually reading. Out loud. To a dragon. Is he reading her a story? Dr. Ross asked, zooming in the camera feed. According to the audio pickup, it's a book about Earth dinosaurs, Captain Miller said weakly. His antennae drooped in defeat. The human child is teaching the fire-breathing death monster about prehistoric reptiles from his homeworld. That's actually pretty clever, Dr. Ross muttered, making notes. Establishing common ground through shared evolutionary history. Well, sort of shared. Big Blue stomped over to the monitor, his massive frame blocking out the light. The small human should not survive this. My planet has creatures 1/10 that size. They kill trained warriors. This makes no sense. One of the Quillites floated past, her transparent body flickering with stress colors. We need to report this to command. They need to extract the boy before something terrible happens. We've reported it every day, Captain Miller sighed. And every day, command tells us to stand by for orders that never come. You know why? Because Tommy's mother is on the communication line arguing with them. As if on cue, the communications panel beeped. Captain Miller accepted the incoming call, and Dr. Lisa Blake's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but amused, sitting in her office aboard the orbital station above them. "How's my boy doing today, Captain?" she asked pleasantly, as if they were discussing a field trip to a museum instead of daily meetings with a massive predator. "His reading to the dragon," Captain Miller said, trying to keep the hysteria out of his voice. Again. Lisa laughed, actually laughed, and leaned back in her chair. "That sounds like Tommy. He used to read to our dog back home. Said it helped them bond." "With all due respect, Dr. Blake, your dog was not a 30-meter-long creature capable of melting steel with its breath." "No, but the principle is the same," Lisa said calmly. She pulled up some files on her end, sharing them to the team screens. "I've been reviewing Earth's history with animal domestication. Do you know how many species humans have befriended that should have eaten us? Wolves, pack hunters that could tear us apart. Big cats that we somehow convinced to live in our homes. Bears, horses, birds of prey, even snakes and spiders. We've made companions out of creatures that every logical instinct says we should fear." Dr. Ross nodded along, clearly fascinated. "It's in our evolutionary psychology. Humans are social creatures who form pack bonds not just with our own species, but with others. It's one of our defining traits." "It's a suicidal trait," Captain Miller insisted. "Every species in the coalition has predators they fear and avoid. Only humans look at a predator and think friend." On the monitor, Ruby had rolled onto her side. Tommy was now scratching her belly, the belly of a dragon, and the massive creature's back leg was twitching in pleasure like a dog getting a good scratch. Her tail swished back and forth, carving trenches in the rocky ground. "See?" Lisa pointed at the screen. "Look at that body language. Ruby trusts him completely. And Tommy understands her. That's the gift humans bring to the galaxy. We don't just see threats and resources. We see individuals, personalities, potential friends. Potential friends that could incinerate him." Captain Miller's voice was getting higher. But then something happened that made everyone go quiet. On the screen, 3 more dragons appeared, flying in from the mountains. They were smaller than Ruby, younger probably, but still massive enough to be terrifying. They landed near Ruby and Tommy with ground-shaking thuds. "Oh no," Big Blue reached for his weapon. "The small human is surrounded." Dr. Ross grabbed his arm. "Wait. Look." Ruby had raised her head and made a series of rumbling sounds. The 3 younger dragons approached cautiously, their heads low and tilted, curious but uncertain. Tommy stood up slowly, keeping his movements calm and non-threatening. He said something the microphones couldn't quite pick up. Then Tommy did the most human thing possible. He pulled out snacks from his backpack. Are those the sulfur tablets from the geology lab?" Captain Miller asked faintly. "Oh man," he raided my sample case, Dr. Ross said, but he was grinning. "Those are pure sulfur compounds. Highly compressed. They'd be toxic to most species but..." The 3 young dragons caught the scent and their eyes went wide. Tommy tossed one tablet, and the smallest dragon caught it in midair, crunching it between her teeth. Her entire body shivered with pleasure, and she made a sound like a purring earthquake. Within minutes, Tommy had 3 new dragon friends competing for his attention, nudging him with their noses, and playfully wrestling each other to get closer to the human with the magical treats. Ruby watched over them like a proud mother introducing her children to a trusted family friend. "He's not just befriending one dragon," one of the Quillites whispered in awe. "He's being accepted into their family group." Captain Miller sat down heavily, all 6 of his legs suddenly feeling weak. "Command is going to reassign me to a desk job after this. Nobody will believe my reports." "Actually," Dr. Ross said, pulling up another video file. "You need to see what Tommy did yesterday when we weren't watching closely." The recording showed Tommy carrying something large and shiny toward the Dragon Canyon. It took Captain Miller a moment to recognize it, the emergency mirror from the ship's medical bay. "He took our mirror? Just watch." On the recording, Tommy propped the mirror up against a rock. When Ruby saw it, her reaction was instant and adorable in a way that should have been impossible for a creature of her size. She posed. She turned her head side to side, admiring her reflection. She spread her wings to their full span and seemed to preen. Then she made a happy rumbling sound and nuzzled Tommy so enthusiastically that she nearly knocked him over. "The dragon," Captain Miller said slowly, "is vain." "The dragon has a personality," Dr. Ross corrected. "Just like Tommy kept saying." She's not just an animal or a monster. She's an individual with preferences, emotions, and apparently, she likes looking at herself. Lisa Blake was smiling on the screen. That's what Tommy saw from the beginning. That's what humans see that other species miss. Ruby isn't a Class X predator to him. She's Ruby. She's a person who happens to be a dragon. On the live feed, Tommy was now playing what looked like hide-and-seek with the three younger dragons. They were taking turns hiding behind rocks while Tommy pretended he couldn't see them, even though each dragon was the size of a shuttlecraft. When he found them, they'd roar happily and the game would start over. Big Blue shook his head slowly. My people have a saying. Only a fool mistakes a weapon for a friend. But humans mistake nothing. They know the danger. They just don't care. We care, Dr. Ross said quietly. We just believe the friendship is worth the risk. That's what makes us human. Captain Miller watched the screen, watched Tommy laughing as a baby dragon gently grabbed his backpack in her teeth and lifted him into the air, swinging him around like a toy. The boy was having the time of his life. And the dragons, these supposedly mindless killing machines, were playing with him as carefully as any pet with a beloved owner. The galaxy, Captain Miller said to nobody in particular, is not ready for humanity. Lisa Blake's expression turned serious. Then the galaxy better get ready fast, Captain. Because if there's one thing humans do better than making friends with monsters, it's protecting those friends when someone threatens them. And something tells me we're going to need that trait very soon. She was right, though none of them knew it yet. High above the planet, sensors were tracking an incoming ship. And that ship had very different plans for the dragons of Draken 7. The alarm woke everyone in the base camp at 4 in the morning. Captain Miller practically fell out of his sleeping pod, his antennae picking up the distress frequencies before his brain fully processed what was happening. Red warning lights bathed the mobile lab in an ominous glow. Report, he shouted, scrambling to the main console. Dr. Ross was already there, his fingers flying across the holographic display. His face was pale in the screen's light. We've got an unscheduled ship entering orbit. Big one. Military grade. They're not responding to coalition hails. Pirates? Big Blue asked, reaching for his weapon. Was. Dr. Ross pulled up the ship's identification signature. Corporate. It's the Prophet's Edge, registered to Stellar Mining Incorporated. And according to their filed flight plan, they're heading here. To Draken 7. Captain Miller felt his blood run cold. Stellar Mining had a reputation across the galaxy, and none of it was good. They showed up on uncharted worlds, stripped them of resources, and left environmental disasters in their wake. They operated in legal gray zones, exploiting loopholes in coalition law. And they didn't care what got in their way. What do they want here? One of the Quillites asked, though the answer was already appearing on the screen. Deep mineral scans. The volcanic regions of Draken 7 were rich in rare heavy metals, elements worth billions of credits. The Dragon territories sat right on top of the largest deposits. Oh no, Captain Miller whispered. They're going to mine the dragon nesting grounds. Dr. Ross was already pulling up communication logs. They filed their claim 3 days ago. According to their documentation, Draken 7 is classified as uninhabited. No sentient life detected. But the dragons aren't recognized as sentient by coalition law. Not yet. We haven't even finished our survey. Dr. Ross slammed his fist on the console. They're classified as wildlife. Dangerous wildlife. Which means Stellar Mining has the legal right to remove them by any means necessary. The word remove hung in the air like poison. Everyone knew what it meant. Orbital bombardment. Sonic weapons. Chemical dispersal. Whatever it took to clear the dragons out so the mining equipment could move in. We need to warn them off, Captain Miller said, opening all communication channels. This is Captain Miller of the Coalition survey ship Star Runner. Unidentified vessel, you are approaching a planet under active scientific survey. You are required to maintain distance and await clearance. Static. Then a voice came through, bored and mechanical. This is the Prophet's Edge. We have legal mining rights to Draken 7, filed and approved. Your survey vessel has no jurisdiction over commercial operations. Recommend you evacuate the surface within the next 6 hours. There are living creatures down here. An entire ecosystem. You can't just. Wildlife relocation will commence prior to mining operations. Standard protocol. Prophet's Edge out. The channel went dead. Captain Miller tried to reconnect, but they'd blocked all incoming hails. They're not going to relocate anything, Dr. Ross said quietly. They're going to bomb the nesting sites until the dragons either leave or die. It's cheaper and faster. Big Blue was already suiting up, checking his weapon systems. We must defend them. With what? Captain Miller gestured at their small camp. We're a survey team. One security officer, a handful of scientists, and a research vessel with no weapons. They have a corporate warship with enough firepower to level this entire region. Then we call for help. Military reinforcements. That would take days. They'll start operations within hours. The team fell silent, the weight of their helplessness crushing down on them. Outside, the twin suns were starting to rise, painting the volcanic landscape in shades of orange and red. Somewhere in the canyon, Ruby and her family were probably just waking up, stretching their wings, completely unaware that their home was about to become a battlefield. Where's Tommy? Dr. Ross asked suddenly. Everyone turned. Tommy's sleeping pod was empty. His environmental suit was gone. And according to the tracking beacon, he was already halfway to the Dragon Canyon. Of course he is, Captain Miller groaned. That child has the worst possible timing. They pulled up the drone feed. Tommy was jogging across the rocky plains, his backpack bouncing. He'd reach Ruby's nesting site in about 10 minutes. Captain Miller opened the communication line to Tommy's suit. Tommy, we have a situation. I need you to come back to base immediately. Can't, Captain. Tommy's voice came back, slightly breathless from running. It's Ruby's feeding time. I promised I'd bring her breakfast. Tommy, this is serious. There's a mining ship in orbit and... The ground shook. Not from footsteps this time, but from something falling from the sky. A massive shadow passed overhead, and everyone looked up to see a warning missile streak down from orbit. It impacted a mountain peak 5 kilometers away, and the explosion lit up the dawn like a second sun. The message was clear. This was their demonstration shot. The next ones would be aimed at the dragons. Tommy had stopped running. On the video feed, Captain Miller could see the boy standing frozen, staring at the mushroom cloud rising in the distance. Then Tommy started running again, faster this time, straight toward the canyon. Tommy, stop. Come back. They're going to hurt Ruby. Tommy shouted back. I have to warn her. Another explosion, closer this time. The Prophet's Edge was mapping their targets, getting range, preparing for the real assault. In the canyon, dragons were starting to emerge, confused and alarmed by the sudden violence. Ruby's distinctive copper scales caught the sunlight as she climbed to a high ridge, her head swiveling to track the falling missiles. Tommy reached the canyon's edge just as the corporate ship's communication channel crackled to life again, broadcasting on all frequencies. Attention indigenous life forms. You are in a designated mining zone. Evacuate immediately or be subject to removal protocols. You have 15 minutes to clear the area. This is your only warning. Ruby roared. It wasn't the friendly rumble Tommy had become familiar with. This was different, deeper, angrier, filled with a primal fury that made the rocks shake. All across the planet, other dragons answered her call. Dozens of voices, maybe hundreds, all crying out in defiance. Tommy scrambled down the canyon wall, sliding and jumping between rocks. Ruby! Ruby, where are you? The dragon appeared above him, landing with a crash that sent stones skittering. Her eyes were wild, panicked. She could sense the danger even if she didn't understand what a mining ship was. She knew something was threatening her home, her family, her eggs buried deep in the warm volcanic rock. It's okay, Tommy said, though his own voice was shaking. I won't let them hurt you. I promise. Ruby lowered her head, and Tommy saw something he'd never seen before. The dragon was scared. Actually scared. This magnificent, powerful creature was terrified, and she was looking at him, a tiny human child, like he might have answers. Back at the base camp, Captain Miller was desperately trying to reach Coalition Command, getting only automated messages saying his request had been queued. Big Blue was loading every weapon they had, even though everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. The Quillites were frantically backing up all their research data, preparing for evacuation. Dr. Ross was watching the video feed, watching Tommy with Ruby. He's not going to leave, is he? No, Captain Miller said softly. Humans don't abandon their friends. Even when they should. On the screen, Tommy was strapping on the makeshift harness he'd built over the past few days, the one Ruby had learned to tolerate. He'd made it as a joke at first, dreaming about riding a dragon like in the fantasy stories. Now he was actually using it, climbing onto Ruby's back and securing himself between her shoulder blades. Tommy, What are you doing? Dr. Ross called over the radio. The boy's voice came back, steady despite everything. What humans do best, Dr. Ross. We protect our friends. Ruby spread her wings, and Tommy held on tight. Behind them, the other dragons were gathering, forming up in response to Ruby's call. The youngest ones, barely larger than horses. The adolescents that Tommy had been playing with. The scarred old males. Even ancient dragons that looked like they'd been sleeping for centuries were emerging from deep caves. Above them all, the Prophet's Edge powered up its bombardment arrays, targeting systems locking onto the heat signatures of the dragon nesting sites. Missiles loaded. Weapons charged. Ready to fire. The countdown began. 10 minutes until the bombardment started. And Tommy Blake, 12 years old, sat on the back of a dragon, looking up at the ship that threatened his friend, and did something that would be taught in military academies for the next 100 years. He held on tight as Ruby launched herself into the sky, and an army of dragons followed her into battle. The war for Draken 7 had begun, and humanity had just chosen its side. Tommy's stomach dropped as Ruby's wings caught the air and they shot upward. He'd imagined what flying on a dragon would feel like 1,000 times, but nothing prepared him for the reality. The ground fell away at terrifying speed. Wind screamed past his helmet. His harness creaked and groaned as Ruby climbed higher and higher, her massive wings beating with the force of thunder. Behind them, the sky filled with dragons. Tommy risked a glance back and his breath caught. 50, 60, maybe more, dragons of every size and color spiraling upward in a formation that looked almost military. Ruby was leading them, and somehow they all understood what was happening. They were going to fight. Tommy. Dr. Ross's voice crackled in his helmet, barely audible over the wind. What's your plan? Good question. Tommy hadn't exactly thought this through. He'd just known he couldn't let the mining ship hurt Ruby and her family. But now, strapped to a dragon's back, climbing toward actual space, he was starting to realize how insane this was. I don't know, he shouted back. I'm kind of making this up as I go. On the Prophet's Edge, alarms started blaring. The ship's sensors had detected the dragon's ascent. In the command center, Captain Vance, a grizzled corporate officer who'd cleared wildlife from a dozen worlds, watched his screens in disbelief. Sir, the creatures are approaching our position, his tactical officer reported. They're flying higher than our projections said was possible. How high? Vance demanded. Upper atmosphere, sir. Still climbing. Their thermal output is increasing. I think they're generating their own heat to compensate for the thin air. Vance leaned forward. That shouldn't be possible. These were supposed to be simple beasts, dangerous but ultimately just animals. Yet here they were, coordinating, adapting, doing things that suggested intelligence. Lock weapons, he ordered anyway. Prepare to fire on my command. But even as he said it, he felt a twinge of doubt. There was something about the way they flew, the way they moved in formation. And that small heat signature riding on the lead dragon, was that a person? Ruby broke through the cloud layer, and suddenly Tommy could see the stars. Actual stars, in the middle of the day. They were so high that the sky had turned from blue to purple to almost black. The twin suns looked smaller, farther away. Tommy's suit was beeping warnings about atmosphere pressure and temperature, but he ignored them. He was too focused on the massive ship ahead. The Prophet's Edge was enormous, a kilometer of dark metal bristling with weapons and mining equipment. Lights glowed across its hull like angry eyes. Tommy could see the missile ports opening, targeting systems tracking the approaching dragons. This was really happening. They were actually going to space to fight a warship. With dragons. Tommy wanted to laugh and scream at the same time. His mom was going to be so mad. Or proud. Maybe both. Fire warning shots, Captain Vance ordered. Scare them off. The ship's smaller guns opened up, shooting streams of plasma into the space ahead of the dragons. The bolts lit up the thin atmosphere like lightning, creating walls of superheated air meant to force the creatures back down. Ruby twisted mid-flight, dodging the first barrage with grace that seemed impossible for something her size. The other dragons followed her lead, banking and weaving through the plasma fire like they'd been doing this their whole lives. One young dragon got clipped by a shot and tumbled, but recovered quickly, shaking off the hit and rejoining the formation. They are still coming, sir, the tactical officer said, his voice rising with concern. They're not stopping. Tommy could feel Ruby's muscles bunching beneath him, could sense her rage building. She roared, and the sound echoed through his helmet even in the thin air. It wasn't just anger, it was defiance. Ruby was telling the ship and everyone in it that this was her home, her family, and she wasn't backing down. The dragons reached the ship. For a moment, Tommy wondered what they could possibly do against something this massive. Then Ruby opened her mouth and breathed. The fire that came out wasn't like anything Tommy had seen before. In the volcanic canyon, Ruby's flames had been impressive but limited. Up here, with less oxygen to work with, the dragons compensated. What emerged was pure plasma, superheated beyond belief, concentrated into a beam that cut through the ship's outer shielding like a blowtorch through paper. The Prophet's Edge shuddered. Alarms screamed louder. "Shield breach on deck 4, someone shouted. The other dragons attacked. Talons designed to crack volcanic rock tore through sensor arrays and communication dishes. Tails that could carve canyons smashed into the ship's weapon ports, crushing the delicate targeting systems. The oldest dragons, the massive ones that made even Ruby look small, simply rammed into the ship's hull, their armored scales taking the impacts that would have killed lesser creatures. It was chaos. Beautiful, terrifying chaos. Captain Vance grabbed his communication panel. "All weapons, fire at will. Bring those things down." The ship's entire arsenal opened up. Plasma cannons, rail guns, missile pods, everything they had. The space around the Prophet's Edge turned into a storm of fire and metal. Several dragons got hit, crying out in pain, but they didn't retreat. If anything, the attacks made them angrier. Tommy held on as Ruby dove and climbed, twisted and turned, moving through the weapon's fire with determination that made his heart swell. She trusted him, played with him, treated him like family. Now he was with her in the most dangerous moment of her life, and even though he was terrified, he wouldn't want to be anywhere else. "Ruby, there." Tommy pointed at a cluster of antenna arrays on the ship's dorsal side. "Those things, hit those." Ruby understood. She banked hard, nearly throwing Tommy off despite his harness, and streaked toward the target. 3 other dragons followed her lead. They hit the communication array together, and the entire system exploded in sparks and debris. Inside the ship, half the screens went dark. "Communication systems down," the tactical officer reported. "We can't contact the main fleet or coalition authorities." Captain Vance's face had gone pale. This wasn't supposed to happen. Wildlife didn't fight back like this. Wildlife didn't coordinate attacks. Wildlife didn't target critical systems with tactical precision. "Sir, recommendation to retreat," his second-in-command said. "These aren't normal creatures. We're taking serious damage. We have legal rights to this planet." Vance shouted, but even he could hear the uncertainty in his own voice. Ruby landed on the ship's main viewport, the huge window that gave the command crew their view of space. She was breathing hard, smoke curling from her nostrils. Tommy was still on her back, and through the transparent barrier, he could see the shocked faces of the corporate crew staring at him. A 12-year-old human kid, sitting on a dragon, in space. Tommy waved. Then Ruby roared, and the sound vibrated through the entire ship. It was a challenge, a warning, and a promise all at once. The other dragons circled the Prophet's Edge, their formation tight, their intent clear. The ship was surrounded. Captain Vance stared at the boy and the dragon. At the army of flying reptiles that had just fought their way through military-grade defenses. At the reality that his easy mining operation had turned into a nightmare. He reached for the ship-wide intercom. His hand was shaking. "This is Captain Vance. All crew, stand down. Cease fire. Repeat, cease fire." The weapons went silent. The dragons stopped attacking but maintained their positions, circling like sharks around prey. Tommy's radio crackled. It was Captain Miller, his voice filled with awe and disbelief. "Tommy, what did you just do?" Tommy looked at Ruby, at the dragons around them, at the defeated warship beneath them. He thought about how it started, just a kid wanting to pet a dragon that everyone else feared. And now, somehow, that simple act of friendship had saved an entire species. "I protected my friend, Captain," Tommy said quietly. "That's all." Ruby rumbled, a sound of approval and affection, and Tommy scratched behind her jaw ridge. Even here, in the cold of near space, that simple gesture worked. Ruby's eyes half-closed in contentment. Inside the Prophet's Edge, Captain Vance was already composing his report, though he knew nobody would believe it. "How do you explain that your military-equipped mining ship was defeated by wildlife? How do you admit that a child riding a dragon had just changed everything humanity thought they knew about this planet?" The answer was simple: you surrendered. You retreated. And you never, ever came back. 6 months had passed since the battle above Draken 7, and Tommy Blake sat in the conference room of the Coalition diplomatic station, watching alien ambassadors argue about dragon rights. He was supposed to be paying attention, but honestly, it was boring. They'd been debating the same points for 3 hours now. His mind wandered back to this morning, when he'd had breakfast with Ruby and her family. The young dragons had learned a new trick, breathing smoke rings, and they'd spent 20 minutes showing off while Ruby pretended to be unimpressed. Tommy smiled at the memory. That was real. This meeting? This was just adults trying to put rules around something they didn't understand. Mr. Blake, perhaps you could share your perspective. Tommy snapped back to attention. Ambassador Chen, wait, no, Ambassador Kelvin from the Keylight delegation, was looking at him expectantly. All the other ambassadors had turned to stare. Great. Sorry, what was the question? Tommy asked. One of the Vexian representatives clicked his mandibles in annoyance. We were discussing whether dragons should be classified as sentient beings or protected wildlife. Your opinion would be valuable, given your unique relationship with them. Tommy thought about it for a moment. He could give them the scientific answer his mom had coached him on, talk about dragon intelligence and communication patterns. Or he could tell them the truth. They're people, Tommy said simply. Not human people, obviously. But people. Ruby has opinions about stuff. She gets happy, sad, angry. She plays jokes on her friends. She's vain about her scales and practices poses in the mirror when she thinks nobody's watching. She remembers things, learns things, makes decisions. If that's not a person, I don't know what is. The room fell silent. Some ambassadors looked thoughtful. Others looked skeptical. But Captain Miller, who was sitting in the observer section, was nodding slowly. The boy makes a fair point, the captain said. In my initial report, I classified the dragons as Class X predators. I was wrong. They are not predators. They're people who happen to be very large and capable of flight and fire-breathing. There's a difference. The debate continued, but Tommy could see the shift happening. The video footage from the battle had changed everything. You couldn't watch dragons coordinating military tactics, making strategic decisions, and protecting their young without recognizing intelligence. And you definitely couldn't watch Ruby gently carrying Tommy through the sky, careful not to jostle him, without seeing emotion and care. After the meeting finally ended, Tommy escaped to the station's observation deck. The transparent dome gave him a perfect view of Draken 7 below, the volcanic world looking peaceful from orbit. Somewhere down there, Ruby was probably hunting or teaching the young ones to fly properly or arguing with the old males about territory boundaries. Living her life. There you are. Dr. Ross found him, carrying 2 drinks from the station cafe. He handed one to Tommy, hot chocolate, the real earth kind, not the synthetic stuff. Figured you could use this after 3 hours of political theater. Thanks. Tommy sipped the chocolate gratefully. Do they always talk this much without actually deciding anything? Welcome to galactic politics, kid. Dr. Ross leaned against the railing beside him. But hey, it's better than 6 months ago. At least now they're debating dragon rights instead of mining quotas. That's progress. It was true. After the Prophet's Edge limped away from Draken 7, everything had changed fast. The footage of the battle had gone viral across the galaxy. News organizations couldn't get enough of it. The human child riding a dragon into combat, the coordinated dragon tactics, the complete defeat of a corporate warship by creatures previously dismissed as simple wildlife. Stellar Mining Incorporated had tried to spin the story, claiming they were the victims of an unprovoked attack. That lasted about 2 days, until someone leaked their internal communications showing they planned to exterminate the dragons regardless of survey team protests. The company was facing criminal charges now, and 3 other planets they'd strip-mined were being investigated. But the bigger change was in how the galaxy viewed both dragons and humans. My mom says we're dangerously good at befriending things, Tommy said, using air quotes. She made it sound like a diplomatic concern. Dr. Ross laughed. Your mom's not wrong. The coalition's been watching how humans interact with other species. We make friends fast, we're loyal to those friends, and we're willing to fight for them. It makes other species nervous. Why? Isn't that a good thing? It is. But it's also unpredictable. Most species maintain clear boundaries between themselves and others. Humans? We blur those lines. We adopt alien pets, marry into other species when biology allows, treat robots like friends, and apparently, bond with dragons that can melt starships. Dr. Ross took a sip of his coffee. It's wonderful and terrifying at the same time. Tommy thought about his first encounter with Ruby, how everyone had run except him. At the time, He hadn't thought about it deeply. He'd just seen a scared creature that needed kindness. Looking back now, he understood what made it special. He'd seen past the danger to the person underneath. "I'm heading back down tomorrow," Tommy said. "Ruby's eggs are supposed to hatch soon. She wants me there." "Eggs?" Dr. Ross's eyes widened. "Ruby's eggs? She's having babies?" "Well, yeah. That's why she was so defensive when we first arrived. She was protecting her nest." Tommy grinned at the doctor's expression. "Didn't I mention that?" "No, Tommy, you definitely did not mention that the dragon you've been best friends with for 6 months is about to become a mother." "Here. Well, she is. 3 eggs, buried in the warm volcanic sand. She checks on them like 50 times a day." Tommy's expression softened. "She asked me to help name them." "Well, not asked exactly, but she made it clear she wants me involved. That's a pretty big deal in dragon culture. Dr. Wilson, the xenoanthropologist, says it means Ruby considers me family." Dr. Ross shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, you were just a kid who wanted to study aliens. Now you're going to be a godfather to baby dragons. Godbrother, maybe? I don't know what the right term is. Tommy watched the planet slowly rotate beneath them. But yeah. Pretty cool, right? The observation deck doors opened, and Captain Miller walked in, his antennae twitching, his species version of a smile. "Tommy, your mother just finished her presentation to the Science Council. They've officially classified dragons as sentient beings with full coalition protection rights. Draken 7 is now a protected world. No mining, no colonization without dragon consent." "That's great." Tommy's face lit up. "Ruby's going to be so happy. I mean, she won't really understand the politics, but she'll know her home is safe." "There's more." Captain Miller pulled up a holographic display. "The Council has authorized the creation of a permanent research station on Draken 7. Small, non-invasive, focused on learning dragon language and culture. They want human researchers to lead it, given our apparent natural talent for interspecies communication. Your mother has been offered the director position." Tommy's heart skipped. "Does that mean?" "It means if she accepts, you'll be living on Draken 7 permanently." Captain Miller's antennae twitched faster. "Right next to your friend." For a moment, Tommy couldn't speak. Living on Draken 7. Waking up every day to see Ruby and her family. Being there as the baby dragons hatched and grew. Learning their language, their culture, being part of their world. It was better than anything he could have imagined. "When do we start?" he finally managed to say. 3 weeks later, Tommy stood in the Dragon Canyon at sunset, the twin suns painting everything gold and crimson. The research station was being built on the plateau above, small buildings that blended with the rock, designed to have minimal impact on the environment. His mom was coordinating with the construction team while Tommy had more important business. Ruby lay beside her nest, which she dug in a patch of black sand heated by underground lava flows. The eggs were visible now, each one the size of a beach ball, with shells that seemed to glow from within. Ruby had been restless all day, and Tommy knew what that meant. "Today's the day, isn't it?" he asked softly, sitting down beside her massive head. Ruby rumbled in response, her eyes fixed on the eggs. The other dragons had gathered at a respectful distance, the young ones Tommy had befriended, the old scarred males, even dragons from distant territories. This was a community event, a celebration. The first egg cracked. Ruby's head shot up, her breath catching. Tommy watched in awe as a small snout pushed through the shell, then a claw, then a tiny head covered in copper scales just like her mother's. The baby dragon tumbled out of the egg, no bigger than a large dog, and immediately started chirping. Ruby gently nuzzled her first baby, making soft sounds Tommy had never heard her make before. Pure motherly love, universal across any species. The other 2 eggs hatched in quick succession. Soon 3 baby dragons were stumbling around on wobbly legs, exploring their new world with wide, curious eyes. They spotted Tommy and approached carefully, sniffing him with tiny snouts that still couldn't breathe fire. "Hey there, little ones," Tommy whispered, extending his hand. "I'm Tommy. I'm your mom's friend. Which I guess makes me your friend too." The smallest baby, a female with scales that shimmered between copper and gold, bumped her nose against his palm. Then she started to purr, a sound like a kitten with a bass boost. Her siblings joined in, climbing over Tommy's legs and investigating his backpack with intense interest. Ruby watched this with her eyes half closed in contentment. Her babies were healthy. Her home was safe. And her strange little human friend was being accepted by the next generation. Life was good. Dr. Ross arrived with a camera crew to document the hatching, but he kept his distance, letting Tommy have his moment. The footage he captured would be seen across the galaxy, the human boy surrounded by baby dragons, Ruby watching over them all, the sunset painting everything in warm light. It became the defining image of human-dragon relations, proof that even the most unlikely friendships were possible. As night fell and the babies finally tired themselves out, curling up against their mother's warm scales, Tommy sat with his back against Ruby's side. Above them, stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, the galaxy was watching, learning, adjusting to the reality that humans had brought them. Humans didn't just see monsters and resources. They saw individuals, friends, family. And once a human decided you were family, they'd fight for you, protect you, sit with you while your babies hatched and the world turned. Ruby's tail wrapped loosely around Tommy, keeping him warm as the temperature dropped. The baby dragons snored softly. In the distance, other dragons called to each other, their voices echoing through the canyons. Tommy smiled, closed his eyes, and felt completely at peace. This was home now. Not just the planet, but this moment, this family, human and dragon together. And somewhere in the galaxy, another human was probably looking at another monster and thinking, I wonder if we could be friends. That was humanity's real gift. Not technology or weapons or strategy. Just the simple, radical belief that friendship was always worth trying for. Even with dragons. Especially with dragons.